Critical Frames, a PlayStation podcast, is available on all mainstream audio and video feeds. Find out how you can support the show by heading over to patreon.com/criticalframes.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Frames Plus, a patron-exclusive PlayStation podcast episode. I'm impressed that I got that to roll right off the tongue without any problem.
Tongue twister.
Today, you guys saw the title. We're going to talk about The Last of Us, the first game specifically, what it means to us, what our experience was like with that game, what its influence was on the brand, on the industry. It's a very beloved title and one that's important to both of us. So yeah, basically I'll start us off. We're going to kind of talk about how we first played the game, what it was like discovering this game, and then we'll just kind of move through there, go through some of the story beats, our favorite moments, and we'll get out of here in about an hour. It'll be quick and succinct for you guys, and hopefully you'll enjoy this. And for those of you that are listening on free feeds right now, a month later, this is a patron exclusive episode that we create for Patron, and it's there for 30 days, and then we go put it up on free feeds. And when that goes up on free feeds, there'll be a new episode on Patreon. So that's kind of the gist of it. But so going back to when this game came out, 2013, I was primarily an Xbox gamer. I had a PS3, and, Naughty Dog was a huge name, as they'd always been, and Uncharted was their biggest thing. And then when The Last of Us came out, it was this unanimous praise from everywhere, and just 10 tens across the board, and talks of how this is reinventing how stories can be told in games, and it's like a show, it's like a movie. And so I was like, okay, well, I have to pick this up. I mean, pretty much immediately, because this is apparently industry changing. And I pick up the game, and it's interesting. I was immediately impressed by it. The opening was insane, of course, which we can come back to. And I really liked it, but between my Xbox sensibilities and the fact that I just had a PS3 but rarely gamed on it, I played Last of Us, I think, halfway or more through, and then just kind of got sidetracked. This was the year it came out. I got it right when it came out. And then, but I'd really liked what I played, and the hype had not died down all year. And of course, it was a one game of the year and all that stuff. And
yeah.
So then I got to, it was the last couple days of 2013, the year it came out. And I started playing it again. And I'm like, okay, my mission is to beat this game in the year that it released. So I remember playing the original Last of Us release on PS3 literally in the last hours of 2013 before the ball dropped and it went into 2014. I beat it at about 11 p.m. So about an hour early.
Yeah.
Before it went into the new year. And of course, full spoilers, so that's not obvious. You've had 11 years and we're doing an episode on it.
Yeah.
The games came out 3 different times. And there's a show that cover the same story events.
Yep.
But I just remember when I got towards the end and you get Ellie to the hospital, and then it becomes, what we're actually going to do is harvest this little girl that you love to potentially save humanity by getting a cure for this virus. I literally, and I'm not just saying this to be a funny gamer podcaster dude, I literally just went in my room playing this game by myself. I went ape shit, and I'm just I am going to not only kill every one of you mother effers, but I'm going to skin you alive afterwards for fun. I was going rampage mode. And then when I got... Yeah, and then when I got to that, when you walk into the room where she's being operated on, there's I think is there the doctor and one helper, or is there 2 helpers?
There's two, yeah.
Okay. I walked in, and as fast as the game would let me pull the trigger, I know the whole thing is just supposed to be you walk in and the guy's no, don't shoot. Now, I don't remember off the top of my head, but
so originally he points the scalpel at you, I won't let you take her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you're technically, obviously it gives you agency, but you're technically meant to walk up and I don't know if you have to press a button, I can't remember exactly, or you just walk up to it and it happens, but you stab him in the neck and he dies, obviously, and everyone else is don't hurt us. Oh no, it's interesting because if you stab them intended with the cinematic style of it, they actually call you a fucking monster, right? But like if you shoot him, they go really scared and they like hustle into the corners and say, "Don't hurt us." So there's
That's
different,
cool.
yeah.
I did not go at him with the scalpel. I just pulled out my gun as fast as I could, shot him and the two assistants before they could even open their mouth. I was just like, I was pissed.
Yep.
You know, I hadn't and that's what's so cool about, like, one of the many things that's so cool about this game is, like, I hadn't really thought through what the developers were trying to do with the storytelling. I had just become Joel, and I was just like, I'm saving my baby girl. You know, like,
girl. Yeah.
And when the game finished, and it had that ending of like, you know, I'm gonna ask you one time, and I'll believe what you say. Like, and I'm paraphrasing here, but like, is that actually how it went down?
Yeah,
you know, like there was because Joel tells her that, like, oh, they got tons of people who are immune to the virus, and they didn't really need you, and they haven't figured anything out yet. It's
all
no
lies.
big deal.
Yep.
All lies, and she pretty much knows it, but she's like, is he gonna lie to me or not? And the last scene is like him lying to her, and just the look on her face, and it's over. And
yeah.
I love that our industry like immediately appreciated that ending, because it may have been happening, but I don't remember it happening. But I feel like that's the kind of ending where you'd see like a bazillion chuds on Twitter and YouTube being like, there was no final boss battle. What the heck?
Yeah.
What a cliffhanger. It's like, no, dude, that was like beautiful.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is like something about how special this game is that it continues to work your brain and make you think about it all these years later. Like, now the game's been released 3 times. There's been a show. And I've still relatively recently changed my mind again on my stance on this. Like, pretty much after I beat Last of Us and started like reading up online what other people were saying and looking into the ending and stuff, it became pretty clear to me, like, oh, the point that this game is trying to make is that you're not really a good guy. You're a monster. And like, you did the wrong thing because you should have let her, you know, be sacrificed. She was willing to let herself be sacrificed so that you could potentially save humanity. Like, I thought that was the central point it was trying to make. And I believed that for years. And then later on, I was like, well, maybe it's not trying to make one point, but maybe several, and kind of letting you decide what you want. Because I'm also like, you know, Joel, like, okay, of course, Joel did lots of bad things prior to the Ellie situation, but like, just fixating on the Ellie situation, it's like, this dude has lost his daughter already, and he's lived through literally the biggest crisis ever known to mankind. His life has been utter shite, and he finally has just a little bit of like love and joy entering his heart again through this little girl that he's formed this parental bond with.
Yeah.
And humanity wants to take that shred of happiness from him too, and he doesn't allow it. And even if she would want it by her own autonomy, he's like, just no. Like, I don't even care if you, I mean, some of this is inferred, some of this we learn in Last of Us Part 2, but like, it's basically like, I don't even care if you hate me and don't want anything to do with me. I would live happier in this world if you're alive in it. So it kind of, now I'm kind of in the stance of like, you know, if I was in Joel's position, I would kill everyone and save her too. Like, and that's not because I feel like that's the right thing to do, as much as it's like, in his situation with how shit life is, and like loving this girl, and like, there's no guarantee that it's going to solve everything. And also, like, you probably feel betrayed by the world anyways. It's like, no, I'm going to save her.
Yeah.
So yeah, I rolled credits right before the end of 2013. Great game. I've been thinking about it ever since. So many moments to touch on, so many thoughts. I purchased the remastered edition when it came out. Never beat it. And then I bought the remake a couple months after it came out, beat it immediately. Really loved the remake. I mean, of course, all 3 versions are great. Like, if the only way you can play Last of Us for the first time right now is on a PS3, just do it. Just go play it. You'll have a great time. It doesn't matter. Like, it still
holds up. Yeah.
You're not losing much at all. It was ahead of its time in so many ways.
Yeah.
And of course, there's more I can say about how this like inspired PlayStation IPs going forward, and like the industry and its impact, and like the show and all that. But we'll come back around to that. I want to pass it over to Joe and say, Joe, how did you first like hear about this game? What was your hype for it? Did you get it day one? How quickly did you beat it? Like, take us through it.
Yeah, I mean, I was always a big fan of Naughty Dog, ever since Crash Bandicoot back on the PlayStation 1, Jak and Daxter, and probably more or less, maybe less so Uncharted, just because I've never truly clicked with kind of like, even though I like the gameplay of Uncharted, there's something about it that it just feels too arcadey. Even though like the games I've just listed, Jack and obviously Crash, are centered within arcadey nature, there's something about Uncharted where it feels like it shouldn't exist. That kind of gameplay shouldn't exist within that
think
world.
it doesn't have the thematic weight of Last of Us, but it also doesn't have the pure gameplay feels of the series prior.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good way of explaining it that I was like missing out on. But yeah, so it just felt like I wasn't clicking necessarily with Uncharted. I've liked them. I've always enjoyed them. But they've never like held my attention like other Naughty Dog titles and series. And I also don't particularly love Nathan Drake, especially in the early games. I think he's a bit of a knob in a lot of ways.
I get it. Yeah.
I mean, I know that's his arc and stuff, but yeah. Anyway, so moving on from Uncharted, like obviously around that time, that was when the PS3 ecosystem was in a little bit of a weird place, just simply because of the cell architecture and a lot of titles falling through and stuff like that. And obviously Xbox 360 was my choice of platform at the time, surprisingly so. I mean, we're doing a PlayStation podcast right now, and obviously I'm talking about
a lot's changed.
Yeah, a lot has changed. And yeah, I loved Gears, I loved Halo, I loved all these games, and I had a PS3 at the time, and I played a lot on the PS3. And the main reason why I had the PS3 was because Metal Gear Solid 4 was coming out, and obviously the Metal Gear Solid Legacy Collection, which is basically a HD remaster bundle of like pretty much all the games, the mainline games of the Metal Gear series. And I just had it for that. I had it for those games in many ways, and I absolutely loved it for what it had. And I always say that the PS3 at the time had very underrated titles. It's just that the ecosystem and the platform itself and the hardware was a bit just lackluster in many ways. And obviously in 2013, The Last of Us Part 1 comes out, and you see the trailers, you see all the the promotion. And it's like, this is cool. You got Neil Druckmann, Bruce Straley, helming the project, and the funniest thing is, The Last of Us from development side of things was their first attempt, because Naughty Dog, especially with Uncharted, always had an issue with ludonarrative dissonance, which is something that everyone critiques the game for, which is basically like Nathan Drake, this Tomb Raider guy, going through hundreds of thousands of people, murdering them for no reason. And it's like, that doesn't really make sense in the timeline of events that would be Nathan Drake's journey. It's too unbelievable. It's too many people, and he's basically
like the world would be better without him.
Yeah, he's a mass murderer in many ways. Do the ends justify? Do the ends justify the means? And The Last of Us was the first point when I think Bruce Straley, in particular, I wouldn't necessarily attribute this to Neil Druckmann, because Bruce was in charge of gameplay directorial duties. He essentially was like, I want to make a game that is grounded, and the gameplay is built around the narrative, in the sense that you are Joel and this world is brutal, but also beautiful. And when you play this game, you feel it. You feel that. So when it came out in 2013, I played it. I was loving it. I was absolutely adoring it. And obviously it starts with, I mean, there's so many moments. I mean, how do I pick out? Do I pick the Sarah moment at the start? Do I pick the David moment? Do I pick the giraffe moment? Do I pick the ending? Like, even, the Tess moment, at the Capitol building.
The moment with the older brother and the little brother. What are their names?
Sam and Henry. Yeah.
Sam and Henry.
Yeah. That whole section, Bill is absolutely incredible. There's so many sections. And I guess I'll take it from the top, to kind of highlight this. Is like, I started playing it and I was like, okay, this is cool. Like, the narrative is dope. Obviously I saw the reviews, Colin Moriarty infamously reviewed it as a 10 out of 10 masterpiece game at IGN, and doubted himself when it was coming out. Like, should I give this a 10 out of 10? Like, am I off base with this? Because the ecosystem at the time, again, I reiterate, for the PS3 was so like, it looked at, it was like, am I going to get shunned for this? And it came out, it got 10s across the board. I was like, I got to pick this up. This looks so fucking cool. And I remember playing it. You start off and you play as Sarah, and kind of before the outbreak, literally hours before the outbreak. And you go through, and Sarah ends up dying in the outbreak, sort of ground zero day in many ways. And it's one of the most like upsetting scenes I ever saw up until that point. We talk about Gears of War 2, sorry. We talk about like Halo 3's ending. We talk about Halo Reach's ending, but ultimately, like, The Last of Us, for me, at that point, I think The Last of Us was the point when another series came close in the narrative emotional catharsis moment that compared to things that like Kojima was doing with Metal Gear Solid 4, Metal Gear Solid 3, Metal Gear Solid 2, Metal Gear Solid 1. And that was never resonant. Like that was never resonating when it came to the Xbox side of things in many ways for me. And it was just this mind-blowing moment where cinema and gaming kind of coalesced immediately in that moment. And I was like, holy shit, this is unreal. And I think it was like the first time I ever cried at a video game. I think that moment, Sarah's death at the start, like that was it. And I was like, because it was like the emotion, the acting, the script, and also just the way it delivers it tonally at the start, where it's like it immediately goes into the title sequence, like in a TV show or something, you know. Showing the fungus, showing like within like a minute, you get a breakdown of everything that happens in that world, noteworthy wise, and you're instantly back as Joel. What, like 10 years later, and it's like holy shit! Like,
well, yeah,
that was so
I think
succinct. Like,
I think it's worth noting, just in case you might not have mentioned this. This came at like the peak of we're really getting fatigued of zombie stuff.
Yes,
and the idea that Naughty Dog would make their next series a zombie game was just like, oh, really? Yeah. You guys, like Naughty Dog didn't have the foresight to think of something more original, but it becomes very clear they did. And this game uses quote unquote zombies. They're not technically zombies, but they might as well be, cordyceps. Cordyceps as a background, as a backdrop, as a way to tell this deep story between characters. And that's what the focus is on. That's why, like, when you hear people talk about The Last of Us, it's not, oh, the zombies are so cool, or like, I can't believe they got out of that building where there was thousands. Like that's nothing to do with this game.
Like, that's the thing. It doesn't feel like zombies. Like when you find them, like you have the infected and stuff, but like you could liken them to like just a crazy human in many ways. Like they're zombies, but they're not the archetypal zombies in the sense of like, you know, shambling along Walking Dead kind of thing. And then obviously you have the variants. So you have like the clickers, you have the stalkers, and then you have the bloaters as well. And obviously in part 2, you get even more different variants. But yeah, it just felt so cool. And that was Neil Druckmann like bringing it into into a whole new realm of like really doing his research. And I watched the Grounded documentary recently, and it's so cool like how they pay attention to like just the little things. You watch things like I think they took massive inspiration, or like somewhat inspiration from I Am Legend, where like the world is reclaiming the city back and stuff, like the nature is coming back into it. And like you can see that inspiration in many ways. You can see the world, like the beauty in the post-apocalypse, as well as the absolute horrible, like just nature of everything that's going on in terms of people dying and the zombies or the infected. And like even to the point of like they didn't want to have, Neil Druckmann specifically said to the sound engineers, we do not want human sounds for clickers and bloaters. We want something that literally sounds like it doesn't belong to a human, even though it is an infected human. It's just that it's so far gone, which fits into the way that world is with the cordyceps and completely changing that sort of animalia kind of style about it. So sort of the anatomy of a human. And it just added so much, like the horror side of it, the detail side of it. And it was just unreal. So yeah, it was mind blowing. And that's kind of where I started with it. And as I got through the game, I carried on all the way through, and I mean the David section was so fucking mind-blowing for the time, you know, like, and as I went through, I'll talk about this more, but as I went through, like the way it interprets death and violence and how quick and short everything was so impactful to me in that situation, because that is how it is in those situations and all that. And like I got to the end and I was just like you, Brian, you know, like I was Joel at that point. You know, there's something about video games, unlike movies and TV shows for me personally, where if you're so into it and there's something that fundamentally like gets you tangentially like close to the character because you're playing it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I was Joel in that moment. And when they take Ellie away and you don't see her and you're just slaughtering everyone, it's like, let's go. Like, let's do this. Like, I'm not letting this happen. So yeah, like I finished 2013, absolutely mind-blowing game. Instantly went to my top 50 games of all time, top 10 games of all time. And I played the remaster in 2014, which was literally a year later, or just around around a year later. Loved it. Played the factions mode a little bit, not enough to get the platinum because I wasn't really hunting platinums at the time. And that was a really cool mode, really underrated multiplayer. Loved it. Played the campaign again, and then as of recent, I played the Part 1 remake, which is kind of what we're examining here with this review first and foremost, rather than the 2013 and 2014 remaster. And yeah, the Part 1 remake is just so phenomenal. It's unreal, and I'll talk about kind of the way they do the faces and how they've brought that up based on what I watched in the documentary once again to refresh myself. That remake is mind-blowing considering how they do the facial animations in the original game. Because it's not like a mocap thing, dude. It's they hand animated everything. And that's so good.
There's no mocap to the faces in the first game?
As far as I'm aware, no. In the documentary,
I thought there was. Okay.
In the documentary, they hand animate everything.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Like mocapping wasn't as like commonplace then as like now. You know?
Yeah, when they're in the studio, they haven't got the dots on the face and stuff. It's crazy.
So to kind of like talk about like the influence of this game and how it changed things, like what would you say if you had to point to something? I don't know what the answer is yet. I'm gonna have to think of it in a moment myself as well. But like prior to this game, what was the closest thing we had to it as far as storytelling, emotional impact, like? And I know, like, of course, emotion is different to each person. Like, for somebody out there, literally Mario could be more emotional than this. That's not a joke. Like, that's serious. Like, it could have impacted someone a certain way. But, like, on a more universal, objective level, what was there before this that really told a story of this level? I mean...
Do you want... I can give you the objective answer that kind of did directly inspire this game, and it's something we've talked about before.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's Eco.
Okay. Yeah. I haven't played Eco. I played Shadow of the Colossus, but
the reason is they cite Eco as a game that, like, basically it's all about isolation and survival, and
you're also transporting someone in Eco.
Yes, exactly. And it was a big, like, Eco was weird because at the time when it came out, it was loved, but it wasn't like obviously a massive game. But ever since then, it's been heralded as one of the best games of all time. And you can see why, because of how many games it inspires. I mean, we spoke about it in relation to inspiring Demon Souls, right? Like, and yeah, dude, mind-blowing. So I think that's the objective answer. But I think the closest, like I said earlier, the closest game that comes in comparison to this as a progenitor in many ways is things like Metal Gear to me. It's not exactly the same in terms of thematics, in terms of gameplay, in terms of characters at all, but it's just that level of like true vision to bring a game to some form of cinematic realm that wasn't seen before that. So yeah.
I think for me, and this is something that I could change my mind on later, but off the top of my head, the closest thing I can think of was like, and it's not because of zombies, but Telltale's The Walking Dead and Telltale's prior games. Like, I feel like prior to this game, it felt like to get this kind of emotional, like personal storytelling, you had to sacrifice gameplay and fidelity to get it. Like that's what Walking Dead was, right? And The Walking Dead season 1, the Telltale game, won Game of the year prior to The Last of Us. It was literally the Game of the Year. And that's a game where no one plays it thinking it's going to have amazing gameplay. No one plays it thinking it's going to have amazing graphics and sound. This is an emotional story with characters and choice. Yeah. And you just kind of like, it's point and click. It's got some little gameplay moments. It's got a special art style to it. But like basically a year later, you get, I mean, of course, like I said, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but like The Last of Us is basically everything The Walking Dead season 1 is, but better in every way. Yeah. Bigger, better, more badass, more emotional, more, better fidelity, better gameplay. And it's funny too, because like one of the common, I think it's kind of faded out now, which I'm glad about, but like one of the common criticisms of Last of Us over the years, especially when it came out, was like, oh yeah, it's got great story and cinematics and characters and all that, but the gameplay is not good. Mm-hmm. And it got so blown out of proportion because the fact of the matter is, and I feel pretty confident saying this, The Last of Us, even from the very first game on the PS3, it has quite considerably above average gameplay. Yes. It's just that the gameplay in comparison to other games' gameplay is not on an astronomical tier of quality like the story and the narrative is, right?
Sure.
Like if you played, you know, and I'm speaking as someone who actually has a stronger attachment to Gears of War than Last of Us.
Yep.
If you played any Gears of War game, and then you go to Last of Us, like you could certainly you can make a very fair argument like Gears of War has better gameplay, but like it's not that the gameplay is so much better. But on the other hand, the Last of Us like narrative, dialogue, characters, writing is considerably above Gears of War. Like Gears of War, like comparatively, like if this is Last of Us is like S plus, Gears is like a B by comparison for like dialogue, writing, emotion, you know, that cinematic storytelling. So like I think the gameplay for as good as it is for like above average, like it's not just above average either. I would say like it's great gameplay.
Yes.
Like, and they really put in effort to like the difference between throwing a bottle, throwing a brick, crafting, getting down, pulling stuff out of your backpack, rummaging through drawers, you know, the cover shooting, like all of that stuff. So it's just that the gameplay, while it's great and exceptional, it's just not nearly as exceptional as the story and dialogue and characters.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so yeah, you said, what did you? So I said The Walking Dead season 1, and you said Eco beforehand.
Metal Gear,
Metal Gear.
The craziest thing is though, I'm just going to go off what you said there. Is that like harkening back to? I don't know if you've ever seen a YouTuber called Nakey Jakey.
Yes, I've watched several videos. Yeah,
yeah. Like if you watch his Last of Us video where he criticizes harshly, and I agree with a lot of his points, with the on The Last of Us Part 2, he says that pretty much everything that Naughty Dog makes is all basically Gears of War. Like it is like the core like gameplay tenets are Gears of War. You know, it's running around. It's like obviously there's limited like platforming in Gears of War in many ways. You know, like puzzle solving, different sections of navigation and stuff, choosing which angle you want to go to. You know, left passage, right passage. But ultimately, like the thing that sets aside The Last of Us, like you said, coming back to what you said, and based on what like people like Nakey Jakey have said, is that ultimately like those things like Gears and even Uncharted, they don't have Ellie, they don't have Joel. Like this is the like Ellie and Joel here is the centerpiece, not the I'm gonna smash your face in with a 2x4, know, and a bottle and a brick, as your dessert. Like it's not something that you should be focusing on necessarily. But at the same time, one thing I absolutely adore about the gameplay of The Last of Us is that, one, it's ludo-narratively consistent. And this is something that obviously Nakey Jakey has said as well, but I have to agree. Like I have to side him with this, and it's not an original idea for him, but from him rather. It's that is Joel. Like him murdering people over and over again. That is Joel, massively. And there is nothing about it when you're doing it where you're like, should I kill these hunters? Should I kill these surgeons? Should I kill these fireflies? It's like, this is exactly what Joel will do right now. And not only is that like, that's not only predicated on the world that you're in when you're playing, but it's also reinforced by, one, Joel's attitude in general because of how he is from the get-go once that 10-year shifts, right? But also, two, which is the fact that like it's fucking said in the dialogue, dude. Like he's like, I've been on both sides. So when you're doing it, it just feels so natural. Yeah. From start to finish. And it's just brilliant. But like you said, you are correct in that it is all about the writing, it's all about the characters, and ultimately, The Last of Us is a slowed down, more grounded version. That's the key word. They use it in the documentary. That's the title of the documentary for The Last of Us, Grounded. They wanted to make a very slow, methodical, appreciative piece of so many different elements within that game. Whether you're looking at the foliage, whether you're looking at the infected, the background of what they're basing everything on, the characters, the world, the sound design, etc., etc. And it just you feel like you really go on a journey. I mean, the game's only like 10 to 12 hours, but it feels like it's a 15-hour one. Not in the sense that it feels overtly long, but it feels very, very thorough.
Well, it's very intentional.
Yes.
There's nothing about The Last of Us that's bombastic. There's nothing about it that's like larger than life. Like so many of the best moments of gameplay is when you and Ellie are just running around. There's no enemies, and
Yes.
you're scavenging through drawers. They're talking to each other. You're
Yep.
picking up a note that's saying, "Hey, I hope you made it out. I left keys in the drawer over there. I just hope that
Dude.
we can last another night." And it tells these stories through these like pieces of paper that you read and stuff, like notes, and just what you're experiencing through the world. Plus, you can infer what's happened based on like, this bookcase is pushed over and there's blood underneath it, and there's like an arm, and then you can see over here the glass was broken. It's like, oh, okay, an enemy came through there and they fought, and then this bookcase got pushed over and killed this person or whatever. And I think that's, I feel like there's something you want to say. I was about to go in another direction, but is there something you want to say, Joe?
Well, one thing that's amazing that is, I think, just very rare nowadays is like optional dialogue cues that are built within just like the ambient world when you play. Like you walk up to environments and things on the wall, and games have kind of been encouraged by and inspired by The Last of Us since then. Like God of War Ragnarok does it with certain collectibles and stuff, but nowhere near as good. But like you'll just kind of walk up to a graffiti on the wall, and it'll ping and be like, press triangle, and you'll go and talk. Or there's parts where you literally can go to certain areas in a level and be like, stand there for 2 minutes, and Ellie will pull out her joke book, but she won't do it any other place.
Yeah.
It's like little things like that, which is amazingly impactful. And Troy Baker, who plays Joel in The Last of Us, he watched Neil Druckmann, him and Ashley Johnson watched Neil Druckmann play towards the end of development, and was like, there's a moment in the bus depot, in the bus station, where Ellie like basically is bummed out because like the journey's nearly over and stuff, and obviously what's happened with David previously near the end of the game, and she just kind of sits down. And normally like this sort of scripted function, or not necessarily scripted function, but something that you do over and over again, which is pick up a ladder to get up to a new place and stack it against the wall, now becomes a moment where Ellie doesn't want to like help Joel and doesn't want to move on, and she's zoning out, and Joel turns to her and goes, Ellie, what's up? And you have that character moment that's built within a gameplay section that you've done dozens of times up until that point. And it just makes those little moments of minutia that are in most games just kind of like boring and by the by and over again. It makes those moments stand out, and also glorifies those little moments in their own right because of certain sections that exemplify it. So it's just mind blowing in how it does little things like that, you know? So yeah.
Yeah, you're completely on point. And you know, the thing is like once this game came out, everything had changed, right? Like everyone, like the Eye of Sauron was on PlayStation for like their great games, and everyone started looking at how they could push their games forward based on what we've seen in Last of Us. You quoted this not too long ago. You can correct me. I don't remember exactly where you got it from, but like, didn't Microsoft say like behind closed doors, like we can't, we don't have the ability to make anything like this, right? Like
they have analysts that look and have looked at things like The Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2, and they always say like we haven't got anyone to do this. Like we can't make something at this quality. We want something of that quality, but we can't do it yet. Like
that's just crazy. Like just the admission of that, right? Like that's because they have things that are like really compelling, good stuff, like Halo, Gears of War, but like it's just not what this is.
Yes.
And that kind of brings me to my next question, which is how quickly do you think we saw? I mean, I think immediately the influence was obtained by the industry, and probably, you know, things were cooked up, but like, what was the first product that you feel we saw that was like clearly because of The Last of Us? I have one in mind. I'm just not sure if it's the one you're thinking. Like, so this was 2013. When did we get the first game that was like very clearly, you know, I mean, well, I guess it'd be a difference too of like, what's the first game that was like successful at it versus which one wasn't? Because like the first one that comes to mind for me is God of War 2018, as far as like a game that came out that was successful as like capitalizing on this kind of game, this kind of quality.
Yeah.
But we also had things like the Order 1886, which I feel like also may have been inspired by this. That came out earlier, obviously not as good of a game.
Yeah.
But I mean, these games take time, right? So it was at least 3, 4, 5 years, you know, before we started really seeing that.
I would honestly say something like you could even push to things like Spider-Man and stuff.
Well,
like,
Spider-Man came out after God of War. That's why I didn't say.
Oh yeah, 100%. But like
Spider-Man, God of War, Ghost of Tsushima.
I think 2018 was the point when it was like people want these grounded narrative experiences that are third person, seemingly so, and ideally everything would be told with some form of like serious gravitas to what is actually being put forth. You know, like you obviously PlayStation is littered with mascots, you know, Sly, Jack, Crash, etc., etc. But I mean, Kratos was always there as well, you know, in the sixth generation. But ultimately, they always had issues with kind of it's seemingly so. Aside from probably Nathan Drake, but even then, he only really properly came into his own like on the likes of Drake in Uncharted 4, in my opinion. But they always had a trouble nailing down a very seriously toned, mature mascot. Obviously, God of War, Kratos is mature. He's ripping limbs off. He's killing people. But there was always an undermining level of arcadey nature to his character.
And he was in a sense, he was immature by nature too. Like
yes,
it was all
and that's
blood
the
and
point
death,
of his,
yeah.
He's a representation of that era,
Prostitutes,
and also like just like the spam circle to bone a chick. It's like like I can see it being a mature character, but ultimately like they're not on the level of a Joel and an Ellie and stuff like that, and even a Jin Sakai and stuff from Ghost of Tsushima, and obviously Kratos when he got rebooted in 2018. But yeah, I would say God of War 2018 was the point when I think all like they immediately, as soon as they saw The Last of Us, clearly everyone in the studios, in the first party studios under Sony, literally turned their heads and was like, that's fucking dope. Like, and was like, holy shit. And this is one of the reasons why Naughty Dog is so impactful, because even though they might not sell as well as like a Horizon Forbidden West, you know, under Guerrilla, or even a God of War or whatever like that, or a Spider-Man with Insomniac, for whatever reason, whenever they make a game from a game design perspective, whether it's accessibility, whether it's narrative, whether it's setting trends like they did with The Last of Us Part 1, you know, to the point when they are making HBO shows about it, they are always leading the pack in that group. Every single time,
and it's always been that way. You probably did know this, but like back on the PS1, Spyro got off the ground because Naughty Dog literally helped them with their technology to get Spyro started. I don't know if that would have been the case for anything in the PS2 generation, but it's pretty clear during the PS3 generation that like Uncharted was hitting far bigger than Resistance.
Yes,
was hitting from Insomniac or Infamous from Sucker Punch, right? Like Naughty Dog has always kind of been spearheading that stuff, you know. And
it's only been as of recent that not to interrupt you, I apologize, but it's only been as of recent that Naughty Dog have been able to be like caught up in terms of critical and commercial success in current contemporary generations of PlayStation. But even then, like they still lead the pack in other ways, and that's what's mind blowing. So yeah,
but I feel like at this point now we're in 2024. I mean, I'm not saying they're like 1-to-1, but games that like I feel like have kind of brought that Last of Us quality. God of War 2018 and Ragnarok, Ghost of Tsushima. To some degree, I know it's hard for us because we're kind of negatively biased. To some degree, Horizon Zero Dawn it's definitely I just feel it's still that's influenced. Spider-Man, the Insomniac Spider-Man, I think definitely, has taken inspiration, and it's really just kind of formed the whole general basis for what people expect on PlayStation.
Yeah.
And of course, like Nintendo was never looking to do games like this, and they still haven't. Xbox has obviously kind of tried, but really not got there. And I think that's just one of many reasons why PlayStation is spearheading, the gaming industry, because games like this are only possible from them. Their incredible ecosystem, console, controller, they've just continued to improve over the years.
Yep.
And, but of course, then the problem lies in what we've talked about before, their new issue, which is they make these games no one else can make, but like they're quickly approaching 300 million, and then we'll only go further from there. And it gets to a point where like, this is such a stressful endeavor to develop a game for 5 to 7 years that costs hundreds of millions of dollars, knowing that to not only make your money back, but to feel good about the effort put in, you need to sell a lot of copies. And if you happen to have one bomb, that could like literally tank the studio, because I don't know if this is confirmed or not, but like this is, on topic. It's been reported that Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League has lost $200 million. And as far as I've heard, that is the most any one game has lost. And so I can't imagine, if Sony did a $300+ million first party IP type game that failed, what that would do to the studio. I mean, that would just be, and plus the morale as well. Like, even if Sony didn't close the studio, it would be like, okay, you guys we spent 6 years developing this game that we lost hundreds of millions of dollars on. You get one more chance. If you screw up, you're all done. Like, I would be like, I'd be like so scared, for like, holy crap.
But, 100%. Yeah.
But yeah, so with the remaining 20 minutes or so we have left, let's kind of go through some of our favorite moments in the game, things we liked about the story. I'll kick it over to you first, Joe. Where do you want to start? Like, I mean, the whole game, you really could just say when the game opens to when the game closes. I mean, that's how good it is. But
yeah, I mean, it's weird because, like, shout out to Chaos and the community, Chaosmatic. Like, he always talks about, like, how the ending was so mind-blowing to him, like, with the whole I swear and everything like that. And I think it might have even made him tear up or cry. I might be wrong in that, so you'll have to reprimand me if that's incorrect. But the ending, while really impactful to me, was never the main focus of this game. Like, it was kind of the point. Like, to me, the ending of The Last of Us Part 1 is the point when the bow, the knot is made on the ribbon on top of the present in many ways. Like, you've wrapped it up, it's nice, it's packaged, off it goes. But yeah, for me, the juice of The Last of Us is that journey previously. It's not about the destination. That's why, in my opinion, the game doesn't focus on the ending necessarily. It doesn't have, like you said, it hasn't got a big bombastic.
It kind of sneaks up on you.
Yeah, it does. It kind of like as soon as you leave David's area, 3/4 through the game, you're already kind of in that last eighth, and it's like, wait, where do we go? Like, how do we get here? We've already, because like the jump in distance geographically is very large.
In my brain, I always think of the giraffe scene being way before the ending, but it's literally right before the ending.
Yes, yeah, it's literally like a couple of bloody. I think it might be like 10 minutes before the ending.
Yeah,
maybe like 10 minutes before you get to the Firefly base. But yeah, so yeah, there's this big jump in time, and the journey is the most impactful part, and that's clearly the point of the game. I mean, if you look at the documentary, from Neil Druckmann's perspective, Bruce Straley's perspective, it's so like, we want you to experience this world and not necessarily like just big bombastic set pieces, which is fascinating because Uncharted, even though it has an amazing world to it and is very detailed, the cool thing about Uncharted is that it is set pieces. It's all about, trains and fucking hanging on to trucks and going crazy and just like loads of enemies. Whereas The Last of Us is a complete direct antithesis to that in how it plays. And so when you start, obviously I've spoke about the Sarah's death, which is mind-blowingly impactful, how it rolls straight into the title sequence and stuff. And it's like, I remember watching... do you remember the React channel where they got like elders reacting on YouTube? Yeah. People are gonna look it up, but like they got elders reacting to and they're playing it, that intro portion, and like they were mind blown like how detailed it is. Like having a child die on screen. And
like this isn't Pong.
Yeah, yeah, and I just love it because it's like, I mean, not that reaction, but I love that sequence of events in that game and that moment, that intro sequence, because as like she's dying literally, so's he emotionally. Yeah. And you can feel it. And like, I keep going back to the documentary because I've just watched it, we've watched it again, but you got to go watch that documentary, the grounded documentary, because there's a part where Troy Baker, like, they have to do like 9 takes of it, 10 takes of that scene. And Troy like goes into it trying to like sort of like flex his acting muscles, show how cool he is, show how good he is. And that's not the point that Neil wanted. And Neil wanted for it to all be about Joel in many ways. And he had to end up like picking up another take and like going again for that scene. And it's like, and they finally get it on the reshoot, but it's like, holy fuck, that sequence is amazing. And then as you go through, it's like, I don't know, the moment in the farmhouse when Ellie runs away and Ellie's like, I'm not her, and Joel's like, what? And it's like, she's
like, I know what you're doing here.
Yeah, and Joel's like, Ellie, you're walking on some mighty thin ice here. And it's just like the emotion in Troy Baker's voice, and Ashley Johnson's like performance, even though it wasn't facially captured, it was hand animated, which is mind blowing to me. And then later on, when you see the David section where like she's crying and she's broken, and Joel is like hugging her and stuff. I mean, just the moment I literally cannot pick one moment here. I'm jumping I'm like a fly all over shit right now because
I put you on the spot, Joe, because the truth is, like, the game opens up with this extremely powerful scene of the infection starting and Joe losing his daughter, and it sets you up for the rest of this game. But what you don't expect is that the rest of the game is going to include about 12 more scenes just as powerful as this opening. Like, they didn't save it for the beginning or the end, or both the beginning and the end, and then the middle is boring. Like, it is just beat after beat of impactful moment throughout the whole game. So it is really hard to pick one, because, like, what makes this such a legendary title, what makes it a 10 out of 10, it's the fact that it's delivering these impactful beats from beginning to end. I would say that when I first played the game the very first time, and I just, I was taking it in as this new thing.
Yeah.
It was the ending that stuck with me the most. I mean, it's probably easy to say that because it's the last thing you experience, but, like, that's the game kind of thematically asking you the question of, like, would you do this? What's the right choice? Should he have lied? Blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, that feeling of adrenaline as I shoot everyone down to get to Ellie. But then as the years have gone on, like, mostly when I think of Last of Us, I don't really think of a particular moment. My brain just immediately goes to, like, Joel and Ellie traveling across the country. Like, that's just, and that encapsulates all these moments.
Oh yeah.
So it is hard to pick one moment. Like even now I'm like, what? Okay, Brian, but, like, pick one moment that stands out to you. And it's like, well, it's the ending, it's the beginning, it's what you just said, like the mighty thin ice, like her bringing up his daughter. It's the stuff with David. It's the stuff with Henry and what's his name?
Sam.
Henry and Sam. It's the stuff where you get to unexpectedly play as Ellie and try to save Joel's life.
Yeah, that's cool. And how it's like actually represented in gameplay as well. She's lighter but not strong and stuff. Like,
and even stuff that's, like, not as big but, like, still good, like when Tess dies, because I think at that point in the game you've played, I don't know, 2-3 hours maybe. I don't even know if you've played that.
Maybe you're that. Yeah.
Maybe not even that. And at that point you've kind of established the world, set up the characters. You've just learned what's up with Ellie. She has been bitten but is immune and she's not infected. Yeah. And then this character Tess, which when I first played the game, I thought she'd be with you most of the whole game, if not the whole thing. Maybe she'd die at the end triumphantly. She's killed off pretty quick so that Ellie can get in there and the focus can be on them two. And, like, that was such I mean, for all intents and purposes, they could have made Tess a main character who was along for the journey, and it probably would have worked out and probably still would have been a great game, but it wouldn't have been as good as being laser focused on these two. So yeah, it's impossible to pick one moment. I'm with you.
I mean the part when after you get out the museum, you go across the rooftops and you see that view of the Capitol building with the sunset, or is it the sunrise? Sunrise. And Joel and Ellie kind of have, like, a little moment of just conversating and, like, small talk or whatever, like, oh, you can't deny that view. And as Ellie's going across, Tess, like, looks at him and goes, hey, stay focused, because she knows, like, what his history is, and she can see him slipping a little bit, like, tiny weeny bit, like,
like, he's tough, but she's kind of tougher. She's, like, he's still got that nougaty soft part. She's just completely lost.
I feel like the reason why Tess works so well as, like, a very cool introductory companion character is because she wears a lot on her sleeves. Like, Joel is very hidden off, but he's also much more insecure with his past than Tess is. Tess is very upfront about everything that she's been through and what she's trying to achieve.
I think, I mean, ultimately, just talking about this too, like, it just makes me think, like, part of the reason that this game continued to blow me away and it stands out as so special is that at this point in time, at least, I was constantly waiting for what I thought would be the next trope that I saw coming 1,000 miles away. Like, I thought, okay, zombie game, it's about fighting the zombies. And of course you fight plenty of quote unquote zombies, cordyceps, but it's not about that. Then I thought, like, okay, Tess is going to be this character who's with you the whole time. Maybe she'll betray you or something. Or maybe her death in the beginning actually wasn't a death and she'll come back later. None of that happened. When they introduced the Fireflies, my brain kind of went to, like, oh man, is this like a Walking Dead where, like, they're the faction, our faction's from the prison and your faction's from the cafeteria, and we got to have our factions get along and learn how to live in this world that's post-apocalyptic. It's like, where have I seen that before? No, not really. Like, the Fireflies had their purpose, but it wasn't about faction versus factions. And and when you get there, it doesn't come down to, drum roll, story reveal. this is the reason that Ellie is immune. When she was a little girl, she was abducted by aliens and they took her back to the planet. Like there was no like, because I think in a very superficial level, everyone's going like, whoa, how is she? I mean, I think even if I had to wager, almost everybody, including you and me, at some point on their first playthrough was going like, why is she immune?
Yeah.
But by the time you get to the end of the game and you understand it's like that, it does not matter at all. It's a narrative. Like, they might have an answer at Naughty Dog, but like I would wager that it's either a bullshit answer or they just don't have one, because it's like this is set dressing for the story, right? Because it's not about. Yeah. And if like the third game, like a Last of Us 3, concluded the trilogy with like, we found out how Ellie is immune and now we're spreading it and saving everyone, it would be like, wow, that'd be so disappointing. Like that'd be so lackluster to what Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2 is established.
Yep.
And I think even, this is not the place to talk about Last of Us 2, but I think I would wager that even if you're not the biggest fan of it, spoiler for whenever we decide to do a Last of Us 2 episode, I think that Last of Us 2 still tries to capitalize on the things that made Last of Us 1 great, whether it fails or succeeds. It is a very human story about the human experience and the characters. It's not like Last of Us 2 was like, now the bloaters are 4 times as big and Ellie's driving total tank down the road with missiles. It's very much it's special for that reason, and that's why it became an HBO show. That's why I got picked up, because it's like, what is HBO so good at? I mean, HBO is good at doing a lot of things, but it's really good about telling these really high quality, deep, adult, personal stories. And like, what is 90% of Last of Us really when it comes? What is the 90% meat of Last of Us? It's Joel and Ellie, their emotions, their feelings, their dialogue, their relationship. That's what it is.
Yeah. So. Well, when they were developing the game, when they started out, like obviously they looked at eco. And they also looked at, I just looked it up here. They also, Druckmann took inspiration from George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead and stuff like that, obviously zombies and stuff. And, but ultimately he completely went the opposite route of that. And he developed the game with the characters in mind first and foremost. Hiring Joel and having the chemistry test on screen, the readings, immediately to hire the actors was one of the first points of call. This game was developed shortly after Uncharted 2. I think like the Naughty Dog split into 2 teams, and one developed Uncharted 3 and the other developed The Last of Us as it went on. It's clear that when you play this game, everything is set dressing, everything, like you said, like everything around it, the zombies, the action, etc., etc. But the best part about it is all the set dressing is so beautifully made by the most amazing interior decorator ever to grace video game design. Like it's
that's made much better by the remake too. I mean,
the
remake really enhances that.
We're doing an hour-long episode here for like Patreon. Obviously a month early for Patreon subscribers or members or whatever, but this is a game that I could literally speak about for 2.5 hours, 3 hours. Like, it's
this could be a full episode or a multi-part series. Like we could literally play through the game and just talk about each chapter and have like 10 episode series. Like, this is, that's simply what this really is for us. Is this is like additional high quality content but for patrons specifically, and it's an hour of our time given to those people specifically, but it is still an hour of our time. That's extra. So
100%. But I could gush about this game for hours. Like the way Joel and the characters move throughout the environment, the fact that one thing I love, I was speaking about it on the latest episode of Critical Frames Normal, episode 10, is like sometimes when a character goes into a cinematic style and they have weight and they have physics behind them, like Red Dead Redemption 2 with Arthur Morgan or Cal Kestis with Jedi Survivor, which I'm playing at the moment. Oftentimes you lose a little bit of control with the characters simply because there's a little bit of like a delay to kind of show that inertia of movement. The Last of Us doesn't really have it.
Yeah.
And that's another amazing part of the game for me where, one of the best parts about the game, the ending for me, is that it kind of gives you this whole open area of just amazeballs like navigation and agency. Like you can either go full at them like Joel probably would, where you just mow them down with the M16 he finds or whatever, right? Or you could do what I kind of do, where I sneak around, take a couple of people on up front, move around, navigate, flank, break line of sight. And you just, at that point, you're using all your gadgets you possibly can do just to find Ellie. It's just such a mind-blowingly well-designed game from start to finish. And everything is so thematic to everything that's going on. And one thing I will say is I tout on about the ending not necessarily being the most impactful thing for me, but when I when I finished it, and I swear, and the credits roll, it's one of the few games, and I said this in the Discord, in the Critical Frames Discord, is that it's one of the few games that I've like welled up and had a ball in my throat because of what I've experienced rather than a moment in a video game. Like, when I talk about God of War Ragnarok, I like cried at the ending, or, like, I don't know, Metal Gear Solid 1 or Metal Gear Solid 4 or whatever. Like, I'll go on about like, this moment broke me, that moment broke me, Death Stranding ending broke me. But I've never had another game like The Last of Us where I've just sat there with like so much emotion, just in the fact that I've probably experienced one of the greatest pieces of media that I will ever experience.
Yeah.
And I watched all of the credits roll. Listen to the music by, let me get his name up here because it's very complex. I think he's Argentinian. Yeah. Gustavo Santaolalla. I think that's his name. I don't know. I probably butchered that. But his score is immaculate, and I think like one of the most mind-blowing things to me is this remake, the Part 1 remake that we're addressing here predominantly, is that this game has facial capture that is purely hand animated, that isn't facial capture. It's hand animated, and it looks as good as like God of War.
Yeah, I never knew this. I don't know how I didn't know this.
This is real. Like, if you go watch the onset like PCAP and everything, and then you go and like watch the animators, like there's a woman who does the animating of it, and she's like showing the documentary people, like the cameraman, like all the bits and faces she can make on the screen, because they didn't have the technology available at the time to necessarily do facial capture like they wanted to, or they just opted for just hand animating it because they could probably get more control over it. But it's mind-blowing that a game like that can be translated so well to a remake on the PS5 that looks amazing. I mean, the part where Joel turns around and says, "You're walking on some mighty thin ice here." The face, like seeing tears come down from Ellie for the first time that I don't think I saw in the remaster in the original version. Like little things like that where I was like, "Holy shit!" Like chills every time. It's mind blowing. And I think one thing about this that you could take away from our conversation here is that maybe our game conversation is going too much into, well, we're talking about it like it's a movie. And I think you would be grossly mistaken to think like this game is only cinematic flair. Do not let us make you think and lead you into a false sense of security that this game does not have the gameplay to boot to compare to the cinematic class that it has, because it really, really does. Like, there is not a single moment in the gameplay where you are bored, in my opinion. Like, I wasn't, anyway.
No, it's a blast to play this game from beginning to end. And it's not, well, it doesn't matter if you're in like a shootout, or if you're in a stealth section, or if you're just scavenging items. One of my wife's favorite things about this game is she just loves scouring every little detail of a building, opening every drawer, grabbing everything. This game has it.
Yeah, it's a kleptomaniac, like wet dream. It really is.
It's like, for the whole statement on gameplay, like if you were to rate this game on its gameplay systems alone, like out of 10, like where this game's an easy 10-10 overall, if I was to rate the gameplay, I would say at the very least it's a 9. Like for the gameplay, like it's a 9. So maybe it's a notch down from the rest of the game, but a 9 out of 10, like holy shit, like that's still some of the best gaming experiences around. So it's very good. And like I said earlier on, like before this game came out, there was Dead Island, there was Dead Rising, there was The Walking Dead show, The Walking Dead game, there was Left 4 Dead 1, Left 4 Dead 2, and as someone who wasn't a huge PS3 or Uncharted fan, who was sick and tired of zombies, I was like, the follow up from Uncharted being a zombie game, I just never thought I would care that much. And I never thought we'd be talking about over 10 years later with, a sequel, multiple remakes, remasters, the show. The game's just incredible. And I think if someone said it still hasn't been, this first Last of Us still hasn't been surpassed, I think that'd be a completely fair statement. I think there's things that definitely would give you a good conversation of maybe it has been, God of War, Ghost of Tsushima, something like that.
Yes.
But this is easily still at the top. So one of the all-time greats in gaming, in storytelling, even the show that, like, I think it was pretty clear that you and me are just like, well, the show's great, but the game's still better. And it doesn't even feel like bias. It just feels like the game was even deeper in touch with the material, because it was.
Yeah. Well, it's not even like, I'm not going to tangent too hard here because we've hit our limit in many ways. But one thing I will say is, like, watching the show, I mean, I played the game like 4 or 5 times now through the various versions of it. You know, the base game, I think I played once. I think I played the remaster 3 times, and then I played the remake just recently, fully. The one thing I noticed immediately when it came to the show is that there's certain elements I like about it, but then there's certain elements I don't, in the sense that the journey doesn't feel as well thought out and as long, and as, obviously because it's a TV show, it can't.
It feels more like a week or a weekend.
Yeah, rather than months of journeying in many ways. And I feel like, again, I come back to the whole like having a control in your hand and you being Joel and her being Ellie.
Because the fact of the matter is, you can set down the controller and not do the things. Like, you are in control. You know?
It's tangential, you know? And having that agency in any video game always presents some form of like innate connection between the player. And you're not a passive observer, you're an active engager. And that's the difference between cinema and video games. And so it's one of those things where like the show does certain things better, in the sense that, like, one thing I loved about the show is when Tess is about to die, and she's sacrificing herself to buy you time. In the show, I love how Pedro's Joel like grabs Ellie and runs. I do like that. There's elements of that, like, proper.
I thought you were gonna say you loved that Tess got tongued by an infected in the show.
That was weird, dude. I don't know what that was all about.
I thought that's what you were gonna say, and I'm like, you like that better in the show?
Oh,
okay.
No.
Me and my wife were watching. We're like, that seems unnecessary.
Yeah, that was weird, but
yeah.
I don't know what that was all about. Craig Mazin was on a fungi fetish that day.
I guess.
Yeah, it was weird. But then I also think what it doesn't do as well is things like the ending. Like, if you pay attention to the way Pedro delivers his lines, like the "I swear." I mean, there's a little thing like, this is how good this game is, right? Again, not trying to tangent too hard, but Joel has a broken watch that Sarah gave to him at the start of the game. Right, and it's representative of like a broken man, a broken human, out of time in many ways. And he's very much living on borrowed time. And if you played The Last of Us Part 2, you would understand why I'm saying that. And essentially, like, at the end of the game, when he's talking about like, you keep finding something to fight for no matter what, blah, blah, giving the speech, trying to convince Ellie, he holds his fucking watch. Like, he grabs it and like looks at it for like a split second, and it's such a small detail in terms of how that harkens back to his character of, like, you know, 10 years ago, and how he's grown in many ways to love Ellie. But that's not in the show. And Pedro also doesn't deliver the lines with such impact. But again, it's nitpicking, but it's little things like that which make this game just still so much better than what is trying to adapt it. Like,
but the fact of the matter that a show that's based off a game, even if it's not as good, it's still like, if you wanted to say Last of Us is one of the best shows on television, yeah, that's a pretty fair statement, you know? So that just goes to show how crazy it is. But guys, everything about The Last of Us, I'll say part 1 specifically, since Joe and I have some different opinions on that. I look forward to an episode on Last of Us Part 2 at some point, but everything related to this Last of Us story, you know, the game, the remaster, the remake, the show, it's all such good quality. You know, we've talked about it briefly before on the regular episodes. The remake is not necessary, but it is absolutely worth it. It absolutely justifies
it's a definitive way to play.
Yeah, it's the exact same game as you would want it to be, but it enhances everything. It makes it even deeper. So I'm so glad that exists. We both love this game. It's a 10-10 from both of us. One of the best games ever made. Even closer to Joe's heart, to be fair, but a game that we both love. And we'd love to know what you guys think of The Last of Us. Whether you've played it and enjoyed it and loved it, you're the biggest fan ever, or if you've just been like, for some, I know this seems crazy, but some people out there just haven't played it. They just, even if they're on PlayStation, they're just like, everyone talks about it, I never played it, but like, tell us why it hasn't grabbed your attention, or just tell us some of your favorite things about it.
Indeed.
How you thought the show did in comparison, or if you played the remake, if you liked the changes. I mean, the changes to me are only positive, but I'm sure there's something out there where someone's like, that grass wasn't there before and it ruins the moment. But guys, this has been another episode of Critical Frames Plus, where we do an hour on a specific game or topic and put that on Patreon exclusively. So this will be here only for you listening for 30 days, and then it'll go up on free feeds, and we'll post another episode at the same time for patrons. We really appreciate you guys. It's, once again, I mean, if you're a patron, you don't need to hear this, but eventually it'll be on free feed. So it's $5 is the only tier we have on Patreon. You get a bunch of benefits like this episode, extra Discord benefits right into the show, have your name shouted out. If you want to support us, go to patreon.com/criticalframes. Follow us on Twitter at criticalframes. Write us an email or a voice clip to criticalframes@gmail.com. Join us in the Discord. We'd love to have you there, guys. Any final words from you, Joe?
No. Let us know if you want a Last of Us Part 2 Critical Frames Plus episode in the near future.
Yes.
And if you do, looks like I got to get around to replaying it because I don't want to come into that episode on an old
hate boner,
nihilistic perspective because I kind of want to go in with a fresh take. So yeah,
and as much as we both like Last of Us Part 1 more, even you more so, I feel like Last of Us Part 2, like that's going to be hard to get into an hour for sure because it's literally over twice as long of a game and there's so much more to talk about.
I mean, we in many ways, like guys, we probably kind of struggled to talk. Like I said, we probably struggled to talk about this in an hour. So it might have to be split into 2 parts, 3 parts, or even if we want to do like a big long one or something.
Could be. Yeah. I mean, in this very moment, what I would love to talk about on the next Critical Frames Plus episode is a three topic in one. Stellar Blade, Nier Automata, and Neon Genesis Evangelion is what I would like to talk about. Those 2 games.
I need to play them.
but well, you've played Nier Automata at least.
Yes.
But we'll talk about it, and if you guys want to sway us either way, go ahead and let us know. Write in or go in the Discord or whatever, and say, hey, I want to hear Last of Us Part 2, or I'm actually interested to hear about Nier Automata or Neon Genesis Evangelion. So let us know. We'll listen to you guys. You'll influence the decision. But we thank you so much for being here. We thank you so much for your patron support. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We love you guys. And make sure to tune in next week for a new episode of Critical Frames. We love you. Peace. See you guys.
Peace. Critical Frames, a PlayStation podcast, is created in partnership between Brian Arvett and myself, Joseph Smalley. It's available on all mainstream audio and video feeds, and all music featured in the show is by Caleb Webster. We're incredibly grateful to the following All Access Pass patrons for the support they've shown for this independent venture: Darren.jpg, Diente D. Hombre, Music Tree 23, Trickster, and Wesley Types.